everyone. Well, Aubrey,
Welcome, everybody. He heard me. He came downstairs and was nodding his head. He was like, I got it. So welcome to my first Fun with Fruit cooking class. I'm really excited about this cooking class because I was telling Aaron before we got on, it just was like very easy. A lot of times with the cooking classes, we'll do a lot of like beforehand prep to make everything look nice so that everything goes efficiently. Really, all I did was take everything out of the fridge. So I'm excited today because I want to do a lot of explaining when it comes to like using things and chopping them, especially thinking about different produce. And we're going to use a lot of different types of fruits as well. So one thing that's nice is a lot of these recipes are really flexible. So if you want to change the pineapple in the salsa to, let's say, mango or peaches, right? You can change it. You can do whatever you would like with that. So I'm very excited to dive in. If you have not met me before or been on a cooking class with me before, my name is Aubrey Red. I am one of the senior culinary dietitians here on the Unite for Her team. I am joined by my wonderful colleague, Erin Pellegrin, who is our director, our senior director of nutrition and education. So she will be helping me out by popping all of the recipes into the chat and also bringing any questions to my attention as they come in. Looks like it's a little bit of a smaller group. So certainly if you have any questions, please feel free to just like unmute, tag in, and ask them. Before we get started too deeply, do I have anybody who is cooking along today? I don't think anybody asked for the recipes, but just checking.
I don't see anyone, Aubrey.
Great. All right. Well, if anybody is, and maybe you didn't get to the computer in enough time to unmute, feel free to pop it in the chat. Let us know if you have questions along the way. Otherwise, really, we'll go ahead and get started. So if you have not been on a cooking class before, we typically start with something called our food for thought moments. So you can see our fun little logo over here, Food for Thought, presented by Merck and Lilly, where we talk about different nutrient benefits of a different plant food. Because if you've ever been to any of our, let's say, events with our dietitian team, we talk about eating more plant foods a lot. But we don't always know why we want to eat certain plant foods. So Food for Thought dives into the nutrition of different plant foods so we can get a little bit more on the background. Today, as I mentioned, we're doing fruit. So I am going to do Food for Thought with pineapple today. Pineapple, quite frankly, is one of my personal favorite fruits. I love that it's sweet and tart. I love that you get a little bit of both worlds with it. It's also really much a nutrition powerhouse. As with all of our fruits and vegetables, they're typically very antioxidant rich. Before we get into the antioxidants, I want to highlight that it's also rich in vitamins and minerals, particularly because of the yellow color of our pineapple. It's rich in vitamin C. Vitamin C is extremely important for immunity, which I think many of us already know, right? If we're catching a cold, we might up our vitamin C intake. But it's also really important for wound healing. So thinking about going through surgery, right? Maybe you're having an oophorectomy or a lumpectomy or a mastectomy. You may want to consider upping your vitamin C intake just to help with that wound healing process. Additionally, kind of on the same vein, vitamin C is a precursor to collagen synthesis. So I know a lot of us talk about our hair, skin, and nail health. We talk about collagen. Sometimes we consider taking extra collagen through our diet. Vitamin C can help our body's natural ability to build that collagen. Now, additionally, our pineapple is a rich source of manganese. Manganese is a mineral, not a vitamin. However, it is going to help us with things like bone formation. So, particularly thinking about our at risk community with osteoporosis, osteopenia, but also it's going to help with metabolism and it has its own antioxidant function as well. So, thinking about antioxidants, particularly our pineapple is rich in an antioxidant called bromelain. Bromelain is clinically shown to help support reducing inflammation. So thinking about our treatments, right? Be it radiation, surgery, chemotherapy, that can cause a little bit more of a systemic buildup of inflammation. Now, our antioxidants, particularly like bromelain, can help reduce those inflammatory markers. So sometimes inflammation can cause our side effects to be a little bit worse, right? Maybe we're having a little bit of increased GI issues or a little bit of extra pain in our joints. When we work to decrease that inflammation with sources of antioxidant nutrients, we're really helping to kind of cut back and to just overall feel a little bit better. Additionally, antioxidant nutrients help to prevent other chronic illness development because they keep our cells healthy. So they help combat our cells from damage and death that just naturally occurs over time. Additionally, pineapple is going to be a good source of fiber as well. So most of our fruits and veggies will help us to get a little bit of extra fiber. For women, we want about 25 grams of fiber per day. So getting a serving of pineapple can help up that intake. And last but not least, I wanted to highlight that particularly the bromelain in our pineapple has been shown to have digestive health benefits. So that antioxidant can actually help because it has enzymatic properties that can help us to break down protein. So if you have any bloating or gas or GI discomfort, particularly around protein digestion, having it paired with some pineapple, for example, is a great way to help that breakdown. So if you weren't already excited about the pineapple, now you have many other reasons to be excited about it. We're actually going to start with the pineapple today because we're going to start with our pineapple salsa recipe. This is a beautiful, like fresh, zesty recipe. I feel like this time of year, we're going to a lot of barbecues and cookouts and house parties and things like that. This is the great choice when you're thinking of bringing something with you that maybe has more nutrient density. Because a lot of times we go to these cookouts, right? And maybe it's like burgers and hot dogs and things like that. And we don't know what are we going to bring with us, right? Maybe we want to eat more fruits and vegetables, but we don't know what to bring along. This pineapple salsa, great to just set out on the counter, put it with some tortilla chips or some veggies you can dip in it, and it brings this beautiful brightness. You could even put it on top of something like a veggie burger. It's so versatile. So I wanted to show everybody how I like to cut a pineapple. So we have our top here. I am going to first just cut that top off. And I'm going to just toss this. You can take your pineapple top and you can also plant it to start growing a new pineapple. The logistics take quite a little bit of time, but if you're in it for the long haul, you can get a new pineapple out of your pineapple top. I cut the base off, throwing that away too. I like to have two flat ends. So now I'm setting it where I cut the base off. And what I typically do is I cut down the side just past where I can start to see a little bit of that inside. And I typically like to cut 4 sides. There'll still be a little bit extra. I'll show you afterwards. But I cut down the 4 sides. You can, if you want. There's still a little bit of pineapple in here that's usable. You could always take a spoon and scoop it out. Sometimes what I like to do is I'll take this and I'll save the little bit I scoop out for something like smoothies because they're kind of all different size pieces. Or you can pop this in the compost and then it'll break down for compost that you can use in your garden this summer. And you can see here as I turn it around, right, we still have some little corners that have a little bit of green there. So I'm just going to chop those off. I try not to go too far in because I want to waste as little pineapple as possible. Beautiful. It smells so good. I think this is a very ripe pineapple. All right. Last but not least, we don't necessarily want to eat the core, at least with this pineapple salsa recipe, because it is quite firm, doesn't have the best flavor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the sides that are edible. And then I'll cut these other 2 sides off. We lost the pineapple up there. And then sometimes what I'll do with the core, same concept, you can save it, you can chop it up for smoothies. There's still nutrition in the core here, just doesn't have as much bright acidic flavor as this actual flesh of the pineapple. Chop it up, save it, put it in your compost, trash it, whatever makes sense to you. All right, so now I am going to get ready to chop up and actually dice, what we call it, my pineapple. So again, like I said, this cook demo, I want to take the time to really show everybody these different techniques because there's not a lot behind these recipes. So what I'm doing is I'm actually cutting this piece of pineapple in half just so it's a little bit thinner when I go to slice it and then dice it. So now I have my two halves. I'm taking it in front of me. I'm going to slice it lengthwise into, I would say, about 1/4 to 1/2 inch slices until I get all the way to the end. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and turn it 90 degrees. Now my slices are going this way, and I'm going to now dice it, which means I'm going to cut in the opposite direction so that I can get tiny pieces of pineapple. This is very much user discretion when it comes to chopping this up. Think these are the pieces you're going to be picking up with whatever your vessel is, right? Whether it's a chip or a veggie or your spoon or what have you. So you may want them a little bit smaller. You may want them a little bit bigger, very much up to personal preference there. So I'm going to take, I have a nice big bowl over here. I have some onions. I'll take those out. And then I'm just going to take my diced pineapple, pop it into the bowl.
And Aubrey, when a dice is usually smaller than chopping, right? So like in a recipe,
Correct.
so we're going for smaller pieces here.
Correct. Usually, not that you're going to break out your ruler or anything like that. However, when we say chop, we usually mean about like 1/2 inch cubes. When we say dice, we mean about 1/4 inch cubes. So dice is smaller. If you can think of tiers, there's chop at the biggest, then there's dice, and then even smaller, we have mince. That's usually what we do for like garlic, ginger, those really, really aromatic types of things. So we cut them smaller, the more aromatic they are typically. Great question. All right, and now I'm doing the same thing with this other larger piece of pineapple, cutting it in half so it's a little bit thinner. I'm gonna slice it long, lengthwise.
I think this
All
is
right.
so good to see this also because, sometimes like we buy pre-cut pineapple, especially if you're
Mm-hmm.
not sure how to cut a pineapple. And, the price difference is there because it's pre-cut. So now we can see like it doesn't have to be one of those intimidating fruits that it's like, well, I don't know what to do with it. Now I
Absolutely.
know.
I
So
feel that way about like pineapple and then melons as
yes,
well. I feel like a
yes,
lot of times those can be really intimidating when you get it. You're like, oh, what do I do? How do I
I
chop
know.
this up?
I know.
So I like to always say, I think with any cook demo and anything in general, there is no true right way to do anything, right? It's all about our personal preference. And then it's all about our capacity. You might not have time to dice up this pineapple. So maybe you are getting the pre chopped pineapple. Maybe you're popping it into a food processor so you can get it kind of just macerated and small, right? Or maybe you're just keeping big pieces and you're enjoying them as slices of pineapple. So there
Mm.
is no one true right way. I always say the right way is the way you do it, right? So this is just, another tactic when we're thinking about chopping it up. It makes it pretty easy. And as you can see, it doesn't take too long, just a couple steps when it comes to cutting it into these smaller pieces.
Yeah. And salsas are things that are like you said, really forgiving recipes. And like you're
Mm-hmm.
just giving us recommendations, but
Yep.
truly, you can't go wrong. There's no,
Right.
you can't screw it up.
And it's not like we're cooking it. So oftentimes when we cook something, let's say roast some vegetables, for example, then we say dice, and usually we want to try to get whatever we're cooking together to be a similar size so that it all cooks evenly. With this salsa, we're not cooking it. So, if your peppers are bigger than your pineapple, totally fine. Totally fine. All right, so here's our last little bit of pineapple. One thing to note is pineapple, because it's so acidic, is that if you have, let's say, like a cut on your hand or anything like that, I would just say put a glove on before you chop it up, just to make sure that you're not getting any of that. It feels a lot like lemon juice in a cut. So just be careful there when you're chopping it up. We needed about 3 cups of pineapple. So I am just saying our 1 pineapple here is about 3 cups of pineapple. And you can see the nice size of this little dice. They're pretty small pieces here. And we're going to cut everything similarly, but definitely not perfectly the same. So I'm just going to rinse off my hands, get some of that sticky pineapple off. If you've ever used pineapple juice, you know it is by far one of the stickiest juices. So, all right, next I'm going to put in some red onion. You want about a half a cup of red onion. So I have a fairly small red onion here. I took it and I pre-peeled it. So what I did is I actually cut the base off here. You can see the base is gone. I have the top still, and then I sliced it in half. I did that preemptively in case I start crying. I wanted to get a couple steps ahead of it. Aaron's got some great onion goggles. I should have asked to borrow them for the cook demo.
Oh,
Now I know for the next
oh,
one.
oh my gosh. I'll get some for you for your birthday, Aubrey. I cannot cut an onion on camera without them.
I peeled it and I was thinking, okay, if I start crying now, then it's a really strong onion and I should probably cut it in advance. But I didn't cry, so it might be a weaker onion.
Yeah, yeah.
What I did is I sliced the onion in half, not all the way to the end. So I sliced it in half, but I left that end intact because that kind of gives us an anchor to hold on as we're chopping. So now I have the end facing you. I am slicing just some really long strips here, not going all the way through to the end. And then last but not least, I'm going to take it, turn it 90 degrees, and then same thing. I'm going to chop or dice some small pieces of this onion. Sometimes you may want the onion to be a little bit smaller, right? Because onion is a strong flavor. You can see we have our beautiful little pieces of onion here. So let me toss that top. And we're just going to pop everything all together in the same bowl. So I'm actually just going to put that right in with the pineapple. And then we're going to do our other half of the red onion. I like red onion because I do feel like it lends a lot better to being uncooked. A white onion, a Vidalia onion, they usually prefer to be cooked. They're also a little sweeter. I like the kind of kick you get from the red onion in this recipe. I think it blends the sweet and savory notes of the recipe. So instead of it being just a super, super sweet dessert like salsa, this helps to make it a little bit more of a savory type of dish.
Could you use a shallot too? Because I'm thinking purple.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm thinking even the purple color just so nice
Absolutely.
against the like yellow orange.
Yep. And then shallot has a little bit of a sweeter flavor profile to it. So not as much zest or as much bite there. But if you're watching me cut this red onion and thinking like, I don't like red onions because they're a little bit too strong, shallot would be a great alternative. We're also about to chop a red bell pepper, which brings up a great point of like color and vibrancy is that the red, I think, is a nice addition because we've got yellow, we've got purple, we've got some green going in. However, I, of course, can acknowledge that if you go to the grocery store, usually a red bell pepper costs a little bit more than a green bell pepper, or maybe you're growing some bell peppers out in your garden. Maybe you have green or orange or a different color. Whatever bell pepper you have on hand, they're all going to do the same job. So definitely don't feel like you have to do red. All right, so I cut the sides off of my bell pepper. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and cut it into long strips. So if you can kind of tell now, we're pretty much doing the same tactic for everything, right? Long strips, and then taking it, turning it 90 degrees, and then chopping it into that smaller dice. Beautiful. I do, after this, have a jalapeno that's going to go in. I will say, absolutely optional. Jalapeno, I would say, falls into that category where I was saying with the garlic and with the ginger. Since it is so strong and potent in flavor, you may want to consider bringing it down to more of a mince, like a very, very fine dice, because if you are not the biggest fan of spice, you may not want to get a huge bite of jalapeno pepper. Again, you can completely omit it too. Sometimes what I'll do with recipes like these, if I'm bringing them somewhere, is I'll make this whole recipe sans the jalapeno pepper. And then I'll cut the jalapeno into rings instead of dicing it or mincing it. And then I'll put them on the side when I go to serve it so that if somebody at the barbecue didn't like spice, they don't have to take jalapenos. But if somebody did like spice, they could kind of put it on themselves if they were interested. All right. Beautiful. And then we've got our last couple pieces of bell pepper. I'm going to chop both of these together. Again, long slices. And then we're going to turn it 90 degrees and get that dice going. I am just now starting my garden for the summer, and I said this on my last cook demo, so you may hear this again if you were on my last cook demo. However, last year was very exciting. I grew peppers, and they were, I want to say they were called chocolate peppers. They by no means tasted like chocolate. However, they were this beautiful, like mahogany brown color. I feel like that would go great in this recipe too. You know, this recipe is all about the fun and the colors. And so, again, whatever you have on hand works, but play around with it, especially too if you're bringing it somewhere, right? You know, maybe you're making it themed. Maybe you're going to, I don't know. I was going to say an Eagles party, but I guess it's the summer, so the Eagles aren't playing. Maybe you're going to a Phillies party, right? So you've got your red pepper in here. So you can always play into that as well too. All
Oh, we have
right,
a
I've got my
question. Real quick.
great. Yeah.
Thoughts on using a poblano instead of a bell pepper?
Hmm. Poblano will have a little bit more heat. So if you're familiar with something called the Scoville scale, it's essentially our scale of just judging the spiciness of peppers. So a bell pepper has 0. A poblano is kind of between a jalapeno and a bell pepper. I will say some poblanos spicy, some poblanos not very spicy. So I would say definitely maybe taste test. If you use a poblano, I would say you could use that instead of a bell pepper and a jalapeno, right? It would kind of maybe do the job for both. All right, so I have my little jalapeno here. Just slicing the sides off.
Don't touch your eyes. That's what I
I know.
that's what that is when I am working with a jalapeno, I just keep saying, don't touch your eyes, don't touch your face, don't touch
Don't rub your
your
eyes.
eyes.
It's so true, especially with allergy season now. I'm like, my eyes maybe are a little itchy, but no, can't rub those eyes. So I'm cutting these into very slim strips here. And I'm just going to cut up all of this. And then we're going to dice it up all together since it's just a small volume of this pepper. Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff on my hands. Onion, jalapeno pepper. I would have to cancel the rest of the cook demo if I rubbed my eyes. So, all right, I've got all my little slices of jalapenos, the same thing, turning at 90 degrees. And then, like I said, I want them a little bit smaller. So I'm kind of just taking my knife on a hinge here, and I'm just cutting very tiny pieces off of the end of this bushel of jalapenos, using my other hand to continue to push it forward, being mindful of your fingers, trying to curve your fingers inwards so that you don't chop anything. Beautiful. And you can see I'll pull this a little bit closer. However, you can see the jalapeno here. It's a little bit smaller of a dice. Again, a little bit more potent, so smaller in size so that when we get a piece, it's not as overwhelming. All right. Last but not least, I have some cilantro. So you want about 1/4 of a cup of cilantro. So one thing about me is I love herbs. So will I put this in a quarter cup measure? Probably not. I'm going to eyeball it. However, I'm going to twist the end off of the cilantro. That helps to get mostly just that greenery. You can by all means use the stems. I think the stems get a lot of not hate, but we always are taking the stems out. But the stems usually have just as much nutrition as all of our other herbs and all the other parts of them. And they have just as much flavor. Now, some things like rosemary, for example, have like really woody, thick stems, but our soft herbs like cilantro and parsley, they tend to have really delicate stems. And those delicate stems, by all means, you can feel free to include those as well. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of chopping in all directions the cilantro. I like to get it fairly small. I don't mind a big piece of cilantro though, but same concept as the jalapeno, chopping on an axis on a hinge and using my other hand to push the herb forward. And now we'll pop this into the bowl with everything else. All right, so to bring all of this together, what we're gonna do is we need some lime juice and some salt just to really bring these flavors together. So let me just give this a quick little rinse. And after we put the lime juice on, we're actually just gonna let it sit for about 10 minutes. Really, the longer the better. The longer you let it sit, the more the flavors kind of like marinate all together. So what I'll do is I'm going to mix it all together and then I'm going to put it to the side until the end of the cook demo. And then we'll see what it looks like after that. All right, so I've got my lime. One tactic I like to do is I'll take my citrus and I'll roll it on the counter. This helps to kind of break away some of that flesh from the skin so that when you go to squeeze it for juice, the juice comes out more readily. So I'm going to take both halves. I'm going to squeeze them right over top. Try to get out as much as possible. You can also, if you do not have a fresh lime, no worries whatsoever, use a squeezy bottle of lime juice. You could also use a lemon if you don't have a lime on hand. Again, we're all about flexibility. Beautiful. And then the salt, very much your preference. I'm going to use about a half of a teaspoon of salt. I would say put some in, let it sit for a little bit, and then give it a taste. You could always add a little bit more salt to it afterwards, particularly if you're having some taste changes. Maybe you will need a little bit more salt to get that flavor to shine through a bit more. All right, so I'm going to take my salt, and then I'll need this over here later. And what I'm going to do, you can take tongs, you can take a spoon. I'm just going to take my hand to really get everything mixed together. But I am going to just start mixing our salsa together. I can really smell that red onion. I do feel like it just brings such a beautiful, potent, more of a savory flavor to the salsa. Okay, perfect. I like to use my hands because I feel like I can get just like little bit more of a mix and a little bit more of a spill all over my counter, but a little bit more of a mix to the salsa itself. All right, so here is what our salsa looks like. Look at all those beautiful colors. We're gonna let it sit and we're gonna let it rest for about 10 minutes, but let's say 25 minutes until the end of class. Any questions before we head into our next recipe?
Marta had a good suggestion. She said you could add some beans for some protein. Love that
Ooh,
idea.
yes.
And I was even thinking, the red onion, you could even grill it and then chop it up and add that in to like subtle a little bit. If you had some more time,
Yeah.
you could even throw that in as well. But I love the idea of adding like any kind of bean.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I feel like black beans really lend to the flavor as well.
Yeah.
You could also do chickpeas or, white beans like cannellini beans. kidney beans, whatever your preference is, but great way to add some protein. That's such a good idea.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will let that sit over for just a little bit, and we're going to move into our simple sorbet recipe. So, this recipe I feel like is very great for anybody who's experiencing particularly maybe some oral issues with treatment because it's nice and cold and refreshing. And with this recipe, it's very flexible. So my plan, at least for my cook demos, is to use a different fruit for every single time I make the sorbet so we can see all the differences and what they all look like and how all the fruits blend up. But really, you just need 8 ounces of fruit and then a quarter cup of 100% fruit juice. It's as simple as that. You can use any fruit juice. I was talking to a member yesterday during a consult who was having some oral issues, but also some GI upset issues. And I mentioned this sorbet recipe, and she was saying that she may make it and put a little bit of fresh ginger into it, or instead of the juice, she may use a mint tea because ginger and mint can be very soothing on the stomach. So, again, super flexible, however you would like to make it. I'm going to weigh my fruit, but before I weigh it, I want to talk a little bit about it because I know we don't all have a food scale necessarily. What you could do is if you don't have a food scale, by no means you have to go out and buy one. What I would say, we need 8 ounces of fruit by weight. So look at your bag of fruit. So I'm going to use peaches today. And at the bottom, it should tell you net weight. This says 16 ounces. So you would need approximately half of this bag. So just think about it that way if you don't have a food scale. I'm going to use the scale. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to need my blender, or if you have a food processor, I'm going to take the lid off. And now I'm going to turn it on because I don't want to consider the weight of the blender itself when I'm weighing this out. I bet the blender weighs more than 8 ounces. So I'm going to turn it on so that it's zeroed with the blender weight on. And then I'll open up my peaches. And I'm just going to slowly start to pour it in. All right, we're at about 4, 7, very close. 8.1, close enough. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take this, put it back on my blender, and then I'm just gonna pulse it a bit. So since it's just the frozen fruit itself, not much is going to happen. It's gonna break up a bit, but since there's no liquid into it, it's not gonna really blend and smooth out just yet. So if you're blending it and pulsing it and thinking, did I do something wrong? By no means. We just wanna get it a little bit broken down first. So I'll turn it on and then I usually like to kind of pulse it a couple times. So now you can see, I'll show you on the blender here, you can see it's kind of all broken down into almost like a powder. What we're going to do now is you're going to put in a quarter cup of 100% fruit juice. So this week, made some very fun mocktails that will be coming your way this summer for sneak preview, summer sips. We're doing it for our second year. I needed pineapple juice. And so instead of spending extra money on peach juice to match the peach, I thought peach and pineapple sound pretty good together. So I have a quarter cup of pineapple juice. And I'm just going to pour that right in. If you have a food processor, you can also slowly add the juice as you're blending it as well too. And I'm going to put the lid back on, and I'm just going to take it and I'm going to blend it some more. And last but not least, we're going to add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. So you can use fresh lemon juice. I am going to use just some pre-squeezed lemon juice. Now, this is up to your discretion. The lemon brings a really nice kind of tart flavor forward. However, if tart is not tasting the best to you, you could put a little bit more of your fruit juice. You also can feel free if you maybe are having taste issues and sweet tastes better, you could put a little bit of honey or maple syrup in this to amplify the sweetness a little bit too. So I'm just gonna splash in a little here and I'm gonna see how well it blends up. We may need to add a little bit more of the pineapple juice because it was a little bit over 8 ounces when I measured it out. So we'll just see how this goes. And let me brush down the sides here just to get everything all mixing together.
This is such a great idea for like that nighttime sweet treat that you want,
Mm-hmm.
especially with warmer temps and you want something like cold and refreshing. This is great.
Absolutely. And I just love that it's so flexible, you know. So even if, let's say, maybe you're having some issues with your appetite and your eating, and you need to get more calories, you could have this pop a couple pieces of frozen avocado in there, adds a little bit more creaminess, adds some healthy fats, adds more calories. So very nice and flexible, which is great. All right, let's give this another go. Beautiful. Now with the blending, it is very much however thick and chunky you like it. So if you want a really, really smooth sorbet, you can blend it for as long as it takes for that to get nice and smooth. I can see here at the bottom, it's quite far away from you guys, but the bottom of my blender is a little lighter. And so I can tell that that has really blended and thinned out. Whereas the top is a little bit darker, meaning there's maybe a little bit more chunky pieces to it. So you could do a little half and half, mix it together. I'm just gonna blend it for just another couple seconds. Perfect. So I'm gonna mix everything together just so that I have some of my like chunkier pieces mixed in with my smoother pieces. What I'll do for my blender, I'll take the blade out here and I'll take my spatula. I love that it's gonna have some little chunks in it. I feel like that'll be so nice, a nice little bite of peach there. All right, and right beforehand, I was thinking, how can I dish this so it looks very cute? And I found my little scooper for my cookies. So we'll try to get some nice little circular scoops of our sorbet here. Beautiful. And you can see, really, it's just as easy as that, right? I put 3 things into a blender. And we've got our simple sorbet. I like to top it with a little bit of just like salt on top to add a little bit of more of a savory bite to it. You could put a little drizzle of honey or a little bit of a squeeze of maybe lemon or lime juice, but
That looks
there,
so good. So
yes,
refreshing. Oh my
our
God.
peach sorbet. So, so tasty. And I feel like I have to taste it in this moment just so
Do the
you
hard work,
know,
Aubrey.
before it starts melting. Perfect. You can save this in the freezer. That's what I'll do. And you can always come back to it a little bit later, you know, have it at another time.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that's it. That is our simple sorbet. Before I move towards the next recipe, anybody have any questions on the sorbet at all?
No questions in the chat.
Great.
However, I did miss one about the pineapple.
Yeah.
Um, someone wanted to know where you found a decent pineapple or what store you went to because and I just think it's such a valid question because it's so hit or miss. You know,
Yeah.
I've heard so many like, tips on like how is it ripe or when do you know? So yeah.
Yeah. I found this at So depending on where you live, there's a food store near us called Giant. It's in kind of the northeast area of the United States. So typically, what I'm looking for on a pineapple is I like there to be a nice yellowish or darker yellow towards the top, a little bit of green still. And sometimes what I will do actually is I will smell the base of the pineapple. Might sound a little bit silly, but when it has that nice potent, aromatic smell of pineapple, that means it's nice and ripe. So I know a lot of times we might get a pineapple and cut it up and it's like, oh, that was so tart, right? Or really firm maybe because it's not ready yet. When it has that really aromatic smell, that means it is ripe or near ripe and ready for cutting. So that's my little tip for at the grocery store.
Love that. We'll
All
all be
right.
smelling our pineapples then.
Yes, yeah, it's don't worry if you're at the grocery store and you see me picking up a pineapple. I'm just testing it for the cook demo. All right. Just wanted to make sure I got the rest of my sorbet in the freezer. All right, I'm going to move on to our next recipe, which is mango coconut chia pudding. So I took a couple things out here. This recipe, so bright. We're using a lot of tropical fruits in these recipes. Again, you can be flexible with it. So if, for example, you don't love mango, we're going to use some frozen mango. You may say, I'm going to use frozen strawberries instead, or frozen blueberries, right? You can do whatever you would like to do. So the first couple steps, steps 1 and 2, I already did, but I'm going to walk you through them again and then show you what it looks like afterwards. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a blender. I have a little blender cup here. You're going to hear me reference some amounts. I'm talking in half amounts because I already prepped half of it so that we can see it now, just so you know. So I'm going to do half of a cup of, I'll pull these both out. I have some frozen mango, and then the recipe calls for frozen passion fruit, which I have since learned is not always available. So I have this passion fruit tropical fruits blend. You can use any tropical fruits. Again, if you don't like tropical fruits, you could use berries in place of it, or melon, or whatever works for you, even if you have frozen apple, for example. I'm going to put a half of a cup of this frozen mix, which has dragon fruit, passion fruit, and mango. So got a little double on the mango there. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to do about a half a cup. And then I'm going to do about a quarter cup. Again, this is speaking in halves of the recipe. About a quarter cup of frozen mango.
I love, we had a question. So Terry asked where you found the tropical fruit blends, which I feel like I've seen
Mm-hmm.
them at varying stores, but I also love that you're showcasing frozen fruits because I think, from like a budget perspective, a
Yeah.
versatility perspective, like we don't always think about leaning towards our frozen options.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I was at the store yesterday, for example, and I think I saw a bag of mangoes. It was 4 mangoes and it was maybe 6.50. This bag of frozen mango was 1.99, and this will last me through the next cook demo. This bag of the frozen tropical fruits, it was a little bit more expensive. I think it cost more around $10. However, this will last me for all 4 of my cooking demonstrations in which I'm doing this. So if you think about it, it's really just $2.50 per cook class. I'll probably still have some extra in here afterwards. So frozen fruit, always frozen at that peak of freshness. So it's still going to have all of that nutrient quality to it. And it lasts much longer because the mangoes, the 6.50 for the 4 mangoes, I would have to use all those mangoes in the next couple of days, whereas this mango will last me a couple weeks up to a couple months.
Yeah.
Great point there.
Yeah. But you
All
didn't
right.
go to find your tropical fruit, you didn't go to any
Yes.
place
No,
special.
nowhere special. I got that at Giant as well. So just my regular grocery store, local grocery store to my area.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen it maybe at like Wegmans too. I just looked through or browsed through the frozen fruit aisle. And if they don't have passion fruit or they don't have a tropical fruit blend, again, use your discretion. You could change the flavors. They may have a tropical fruit blend that's like mango and pineapple and kiwi, right? And use that instead. It'll still have really delicious flavors to it. Awesome. All right, so I've got this in here. What I'm also going to do is I am going to put 1.5 cups of coconut milk. You could use canned coconut milk, or you can use coconut milk from a box. I'm going to put this in here together as well too. So let me grab my measuring cup. And we're going to do 1.5 cups. Perfect. Gets me right to my max fill line, so it's perfect. And I get to use this again, so we'll give it a little rinse. And I'm just gonna blend these two together. So I'm gonna take my blade, pop that on the top. With my blender, it has a single serve option on it. So I'm gonna take it, just blend it until it's smooth. You can see that this one had more dragon fruit in it because it is so pink, which is so fun. I love that.
Oh my God.
Before I move forward with this, because I want to just use the same bowl just to save some space, I'll show you the chia pudding portion of it that I made yesterday. So this, after we mix our next few ingredients together, this is what it'll look like. You can see it's a very different color. Clearly, I had a different mix of those tropical fruits. However, it's a little bit thick, more gelatinous because the chia seeds start to soak up that moisture. What I'm going to do quick is I'm just going to take this. I have 2 fun glasses here. A full recipe makes 4, but a half recipe makes 2. Beautiful. And I'm just going to pop these in. Give it a little stir. All right. We'll come back to these. However, now that I have my bowl, I'm going to take my same bowl. I'm going to pour in my mixture. And a full recipe calls for 3/4 cup of chia seeds. So we're going to do half of that, which is 3/8 of a cup of chia seeds. So what I have is my 1/4 cup measure. So I'm going to do 1.5 to get 3/8. Pour that in. And then my half, pour that in as well. We're going to put in about a tablespoon of maple syrup. Totally optional if you are thinking, I don't want the extra sweetness in there. By no means do you have to. There we go. And then about a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then more for color than anything, you can add a little bit of turmeric to it. So here's my vanilla. And then I'm just going to add a couple shakes of turmeric. It's pretty pink, so I think it's going to stay pretty pink.
The color is beautiful.
I know. It's so fun. I just feel like with this recipe, because it's so vibrant, I'm just going to give this a really nice mix. What you want is you want all of these chia seeds to become saturated. What I tend to like to do, I'll put this in the fridge, and then after about 15 or 20 minutes, if you have the time, right? If you're not like putting it in right before you go to bed, I'll take it and I'll just shake it up again. This prevents any of the chia seeds from like sitting at the bottom and soaking up most of the liquid. And then there's kind of this change in texture throughout the pudding. So I mix everything up. All right. I'm just going to put the lid on. You want to put this in the fridge for ideally at least 12 hours. So what I did is I put that other chia pudding in the fridge overnight before I went to bed. So I have my pudding. I'll just give it a little mix in here too. You can kind of see all the chia seeds on the top there. And then I'm going to let this sit for 15, 20 minutes, give it another shake just to make sure all the chia seeds are getting saturated. And then I'll leave it until tomorrow and we'll have our chia pudding out of it. Now, not much to do beyond this. We have our beautiful coconutty, mangoey flavor. What we're going to do, let me take just a little cutting board. I have some mango that I thawed out, some frozen mango. I just left it sitting on my counter this morning. If you're thinking, I didn't do that, Aubrey, you can always just pop it into the microwave too. Or if you happen to have a fresh mango on hand, you could use that as well. I'm just going to take it and I'm going to dice it up into little pieces so that we can top our chia pudding with some more fresh, different textural mango. So for this, I do not care what size the pieces are. I'm just kind of doing a rough little chop here so that I don't have a huge bite of the mango. And then I'll go the other direction. Beautiful. All right. I'm going to take my mango. I'm going to pop it on top of the pudding. So fun. And last but not least, totally optional, you could put on some flaked coconut, or if you can find at your store, some coconut shavings. So I was lucky, I found some coconut chips. These do have a little bit of added sugar. So thinking about, we can oftentimes find maybe ones without, or when we get shredded coconut, there usually are options for no sugar added shredded coconut. Usually I find them in the baking section of my store if you're looking for them. I'm going to take these chips, add a fun little bit on top there. Beautiful. All right. And this is our mango coconut chia pudding.
I love that.
I mean, I'm super excited to eat this afterwards.
Yeah.
So
Oh my God.
very fresh, very different, right? When we think about chia pudding, or at least when I think about chia pudding, I usually think about like vanilla, or sometimes I'll make it fun with like a chocolate flavor. I'm thinking more of this like dessert flavors, but this tropical flavor adds such a nice complexity to it, especially with the coconut milk. Really, really delicious there. Before we get to our last recipe, any questions on the mango coconut chia pudding?
Nothing in the chat, but I
Okay.
feel like these are like so seasonally getting me excited for warm weather.
I know.
This
I
is
know.
the
The rain
perfect
coming
blend of
isn't going to be
recipes.
great.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it.
Good, 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 good. Well, the last one, I feel like this is also just like a perfect summer barbecue recipe. So the last recipe is strawberry balsamic bruschetta. So we're moving away from the tropical side of things. I preheated my oven to 400 just because we're going to toast some bread a little bit for it. So what I'm going to do, I am going to take a cutting board, a dry one, and I have a baguette here. You could use any bread that you would like. I like baguette because I feel like I can get these nice little rounds out of it. This I just got at my regular grocery store. And I'm going to cut about 8 to 10 slices of my baguette. I like them to be a little bit thicker. I'm going to cut the end off here. And I'm going to cut them about a 1/2 inch thick for our pieces. So I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now I have a baking sheet where I have some tin foil on it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop our pieces of baguette onto the baking sheet, and I'm just going to brush them with a little bit of olive oil. So I've got all my ingredients here. I'll bring those forward. And let's clean off our baking sheet so we can pop those together. Perfect. All right, so I've got my bread. I'll lay it out here. Now you'll need a tablespoon or so of olive oil. So if you need a little bit more, completely fine. I usually will either in a small dish put some olive oil and use the brush to brush it, or I will pour the olive oil directly on the pieces and brush it that way. So let's get a small dish, get some olive oil, and then I'll dip my brush in the olive oil and brush each of those pieces. It helps them to get just a little bit of a crisp on top. Again, my oven's at 400. If you're thinking like, geez, I'm in a rush, I don't know that I have time for these to cook, you could also put your oven on broiler. We're just trying to get these a little bit crispy, nothing crazy. All right. Beautiful. And you're just gonna let them crisp up in the oven for about 5-10 minutes. Really just keep an eye on them. You just want them to be a little bit firmer, just so they have more bite and more texture to them. So I'm gonna take these, pop them in the oven. The oven's still preheating, but they'll still start to get some of that texture even as it's preheating. Now I'm gonna prep my strawberries, my balsamic strawberries. So I have a big bowl here. I need about 1.5 cups of diced strawberries. So give my strawberries a little rinse. And then I'm just going to start chopping up my strawberries into fairly small pieces. Again, we're thinking dice, so we're thinking on the smaller side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take each strawberry, chop the top off, and then I typically tend to cut it into slices. And then usually what I'll do, I'll kind of put those off to the side. I'll keep cutting my strawberries up into slices until I get a good amount. And then I like to kind of pile them all together, and that's how I start to dice them up. For this, again, same thing, we're not cooking them. It's okay if they're all a little bit of a different size. It's okay if some are bigger than the others. You could do slices of strawberries if you wanted to. You by no means have to dice them up. So whatever makes the most sense to you for your time and your capacity. And with this, strawberries are a really great, I feel like, bright, but also subtly sweet fruit to use with it. But same thing as the other recipes, you could, by any means, use a different fruit if that makes more sense to you. Different berry, maybe, or if you wanted to use peaches, or if you wanted to use the extra pineapple you had, be flexible with it.
I definitely think peaches with the balsamic would
Mm-hmm.
be so good.
So good. And so I feel like, especially we'll be getting into peach season soon, just like so deliciously fresh.
Oof, yeah.
Beautiful. All right. So I have some strawberries here. Close this up. And I'm just going to chop these up. So what I'll do, I have my big pile of strawberries here. As a time saver, instead of chopping each individual strawberry, I take my pile of strawberries, I cut them lengthwise up and down. I like to go nice and slow just to make sure that I'm actually getting all of the strawberries sliced. And then what I like to do to make my life even easier, instead of saying, I'll turn the strawberries or this, I just turn the cutting board and I go in the opposite direction. And you'll see Some of these strawberries are bigger, some of them are smaller, more than okay. Some will have
Like
maybe
that's
a little
like
bit
the
more.
work smarter, not harder, Aubrey.
Exactly, right? Why turn them all around and get them all mixed up when you can just turn the cutting board
Agreed.
around?
Agreed.
Perfect. All right, so now we have all of our strawberries. Again, all different sizes, completely fine. I'm going to pop them into our bowl. And now I need some basil. So I love using fresh basil, especially this time of year. I feel like this is where I get excited about this time of year is the fresh herbs. So you want about 5 pieces of basil. What we're going to do is we're going to julienne them. So a fun technique is you'll take your basil. So let's see, 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna get 5 kind of big pieces here. 5. Perfect. And I'm going to take them and I actually kind of roll them up a little bit. And then I just cut them into long strips by cutting them through that roll. And I'll show you what they look like afterwards. So julienne means cutting into kind of like long strips. We just have our little strips of basil here. I'm going to add those in with our strawberries. And then I'm also going to add about a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar. And then just give everything a little bit of a mix. And I'm going to give it just a minute or so to really marinate those flavors together. So give that a little bit of a mix. Beautiful. And I like to just make sure all of the strawberries are darker, meaning that some balsamic has reached them, right? Perfect. So we have our marinating strawberries. What I'm going to do now here is I have another bowl. I am going to, in my fridge, I have some ricotta cheese. You could also use cottage cheese if you are looking to have a little bit of a higher protein snack. And cottage cheese, you could leave it the way it is, or you could even consider blending it if you wanted it to be a smoother texture. I'm going to take half of a cup of the ricotta. Perfect. And then I'm just going to sprinkle in a little bit of salt and give it just a gentle mix. Perfect. All right. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our bread out of the oven once it's nice and crisp. We're going to top it with a spread of our ricotta, and then we're going to top that with some of our balsamic strawberries. And very fun, last but not least, is we will put a little bit of balsamic glaze on it. Totally optional step, but a delicious step none the least. So let's check out our bread. It's starting to get brown. For the sake of time, we'll take it out. Let me put a pivot down.
I wonder if you could even do like a creme fraiche as
Ooh,
or like a mascarpone if you want something like a little sweeter,
absolutely.
any of those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think both would work well, especially the mascarpone would be great for like a little bit of a sweeter,
Yes.
bite.
Yes.
So I'm just popping my ricotta on here, spreading it out. And this is a great appetizer, right? If you're getting ready to have people over and thinking like, oh, what can I serve everybody while people are coming in? This takes 10 minutes to whip up, super quick. All right. Perfect. And then I'm just going to top it with my strawberries. Pop those on. So pretty. I love the like white with the red
Mm-hmm.
color. I just feel
Mm-hmm.
like such a nice contrast. You can also top it if you want to chop up a little bit of extra basil just to put some more like a bright green on top of it. You could do that as well too.
And like in theory, you could prep the strawberries ahead of time, prep
Mm-hmm.
the cottage cheese mixture ahead of time. And if you
Yep.
are like bringing this to a party, slice your bread and just like assemble on the spot.
Absolutely. No need to, make it all. If you want to save it, let's say you're thinking, I'm going to make the strawberries. I want to have this as like a little snack. Save the bread, the cheese, and the strawberries separate, and then just whip it up in the moment, right? Pop them into the oven, put them
Yeah.
in the toaster,
Yeah.
honestly, just get them a little crispy, and then you can top these. Super
Mhm.
simple.
Yeah.
All right. And last, I'm going to do a fun drizzle of balsamic glaze, which adds just a nice little extra sweet bit.
I think there's something about balsamic with fruit that
I know.
is just a beautiful pairing.
I know. So tasty and just
Hmm.
like so different, I feel like it's not something that we're having every day. So these are our strawberry balsamic
Oof.
bruschetta. So different than a typical bruschetta, right? We don't have tomatoes, but we have strawberries. However, let's pop everything back out here. So we've got our bruschetta. We've got our mango coconut chia pudding. We've got our pineapple salsa, which I will dish up into the bowl now that we let it sit for a while, marinate in those flavors as I pour it over the counter. And like I said, you can serve it with chips, you can serve it with veggies, whatever makes sense to you. I have some black bean quinoa chips, so we've got a little extra fiber on those. All right, and then we have our sorbet in the freezer. Boom. Those are our fun with fruit recipes today.
Love it.
All super simple, super fresh, and super seasonal and flexible, right? So change what you would like. I would love to hear how everybody enjoys them. And if you do make changes, what you like, what you don't like. And hopefully, we'll see you on another cooking demo again soon. Do we have any questions before we hop off today?
No questions, but I did put the link to our food for thought so you can get all Aubrey's
Awesome.
recipes as well as Michelle's, and you can see what she's cooking up for May and June also.
Yep.
Yep, Terry agreed. It does look amazing.
She's got some spring and summer salad, so I can't wait to hop on Michelle's cooking class because I love a salad recipe. They're all different salads too, right? It's not just greens and this and that. She's got like a fennel salad, a farro salad, so definitely check those out.
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining me on a Saturday morning. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your hopefully sunny Saturday. Again, make sure you sign up for Michelle's cooking classes. And if you thought this didn't look too bad, I want to cook along, sign up for another one of my cooking classes. And hopefully, I will see you cooking along soon. But otherwise, have a great rest of your day, everybody.